Have you ever seen a Harvard-trained doctor, top of his class, go completely silent because a child offered him a single boiled banana? What if I told you that some of America's most accomplished doctors came to the Philippines to teach medicine, only to realize they were the ones who needed to learn? In small, remote villages of the Philippines, a story unfolds that few outsiders ever see. It's not a story about charity or poverty, but about discovery. Take Dr. Lauren Michaels, a 52-year-old trauma surgeon from Seattle, and Dr. Jacob Reed, an internal medicine specialist from Kansas. Both traveled across the world believing they were bringing help, but what they found was a kind of wisdom no textbook had ever prepared them for. It wasn't the diseases that surprised them, it was the people, their resilience, their warmth, their strength in the face of hardship. Like the grandmother in Samar who could tell a child had a fever with just a touch and a prayer, or a village with no electricity that cared for the dying with more grace than some of the most advanced hospitals in New York. Dr. Michael's turning point came in a bamboo hut in Cameroon Sur. She examined Maria, a woman with late-stage cancer. Maria didn't ask how long she had left or for pain medicine. She simply said, "Doc, pray with me first. My strength is not mine. I borrow it from God. Trained in science and logic, doctor." Michaels didn't know how to respond. In that pause, she realized, I thought I came here with answers, but I didn't even know the right questions. Dr. Reed's awakening came more slowly. He had always taught his residents to stay emotionally detached, but after 3 weeks in a coastal village, he found himself crying alone on the beach. A 7-year-old boy who had just lost his mother to typhoid had handed Reed his only pair of slippers after the doctor stepped into the mud. "I thought I came here to give," Reed said, "but this child who had nothing gave me everything." Moments like these kept happening. Each one chipped away at the doctor's pride. They began to see that healing wasn't only about medicine. Sometimes it was about sitting quietly with someone. Sometimes the real medicine wasn't in a pill, but in presence. One evening, after a long day of walking through flooded fields, Dr. Michaels saw women singing beside a dying elder. They weren't crying, but smiling, singing lullabies in the glow of a small lamp. That night she wrote in her journal, "They do not fear death here. They look at it and sing. How can people with so little carry so much wisdom?" The team realized they hadn't stepped into a third world country. They had stepped into a world rich in other ways. First in faith, first in family, first in a love that gives without asking if you deserve it. And that was only the beginning. What they learned next would change them even more. They saw how communities built entire health systems with no government support, how neighbors worked together through Bayanihan to deliver babies, how spiritual rituals and modern medicine mixed in ways Western doctors might laugh at, yet worked. It challenged not just their medical training, but their very ideas of what it means to live well. They had to face their own assumptions about wealth, progress, and even humanity itself. This was no longer a medical mission. It was a spiritual journey, and it all began with a boiled banana, offered by a child who held it out with both hands as if he were giving the world. Rain had just started pouring when Dr. Jacob Reed found himself stranded in a small chapel that doubled as a clinic. The roof was patched with old tarps, the floor half mud, half concrete. Outside, children laughed barefoot in the puddles, chasing a worn-out volleyball. Inside, a young mother cradled her newborn, delivered in that same chapel just 3 nights earlier. No lights, no machines, no sterile beds. Just the steady hands of a midwife named Ailing Pina and the whispered prayers of women surrounding her. Back in the U.S., that birth would have taken a full hospital team, machines, and endless paperwork. Here it happened with instinct, tradition, and something deeper, something Jacob couldn't quite name. When he first arrived, Jacob had asked Ailing where she got her training. She smiled and said simply, "God taught me." He almost laughed, not out of disrespect, but disbelief. Yet 3 weeks later, he had seen her save lives with skill and intuition no textbook could teach. She listened not just with her ears, but with her whole presence, even to the silence between heartbeats. Meanwhile, Dr. Lauren Michaels was changing too. She noticed herself walking slower, speaking more gently, asking instead of assuming. She kept a notebook of the things she couldn't explain. The old man in Masbate who walked 5 kilometers every Sunday to bring fruit to a sick neighbor. The fisherman who, after losing his entire boat in a storm, still shared fish with the mission team. They have nothing, she wrote one night, and yet they give as if their hearts never run dry. One evening, the doctors sat with the team under coconut trees, sipping instant coffee. But instead of talking about procedures or cases, they talked about what they were feeling, something like a softening inside. I used to think compassion was something you rationed, Jacob admitted. Give just enough to stay professional. But here, they don't ration anything. Not love, not time, not forgiveness. Lauren nodded. Back home, we spend thousands on stress workshops and leadership seminars. But here, they just sing or sit together in silence. They cry without shame. They laugh without guilt. And somehow they don't just survive, they thrive. The conversation faded. In the distance, a boy strummed a guitar as the sun sank over the rice fields. The sound drifted in the air, gentle and aching. That night, they joined the villagers for dinner. Boiled cassava, dried fish, and a single pot of herb broth. By Western standards, it wasn't enough. But somehow everyone ate. Everyone smiled. An elder turned to Dr. Michaels and said, "We do not count how much is on the plate. We count who is at the table." Something shifted in her chest. She realized they hadn't come to change this place. This place was changing them. The villagers didn't see them as saviors. They saw them as fellow travelers, trying, just like everyone else, to remember what it means to be human. The lesson hit hardest the day they lost their first patient. A young girl just 9 years old had fallen gravely ill. Despite everything the team tried, the medicines came too late. The infection was too strong. As her body was wrapped in a simple white cloth, her mother wept, not in anger or blame, but with a grace that stunned everyone. She turned to Dr. Jacob, who was fighting back tears, and said, "Thank you, doctor. You are not God. You did all you could. By God's mercy, maybe we'll meet again in heaven." Jacob broke, not just from grief, but from the mother's peace, peace deeper than any medical success he had ever known. That night, the team held a small service. They lit a candle, sang softly, and sat shoulder to shoulder, Filipino and American. No borders, no uniforms, no roles. Just people, holding both the sacred and the sorrowful. In that silence, they realized textbooks had taught them anatomy, but these people were teaching them humanity, and the lessons weren't over. In the weeks that followed, the mission changed. Less about schedules, more about presence. They slowed down. They listened, not just with stethoscopes, but with their whole selves. Dr. Lauren Michaels began walking each morning with a local healer named Manang Lita, a woman in her 70s who carried a basket of herbs and oils. She had no license, no degrees, yet people walked miles to seek her wisdom. One morning, a boy came in, shaking from malaria. Lauren prepared an IV, but watched as Manang Lita knelt, pressed leaves gently on his chest, and murmured prayers. The boy's mother held his feet and sang an old lullaby. Lauren realized she was witnessing something beyond explanation. Not just a healing of the body, but of the spirit. Later, she asked Lita why she never studied formal medicine. The woman smiled. "Because God did not put me in a school. He put me in a family, and that was enough." Lauren had no answer. She had seen too much. Meanwhile, Dr. Jacob Reed stopped wearing his lab coat. In this place, titles meant little. What mattered were actions, helping repair fishing nets, collecting water, sitting under trees, just being present. One afternoon, a teenager named Noel, who had been watching him, asked, "Doc, are you sad?" Jacob was caught off guard. "Why do you ask?" "Because your eyes don't match your smile," Noel said gently. "You look like someone who is always somewhere else." The words struck deep. Jacob realized Noel was right. Even here, surrounded by beauty, a part of him was still back in Kansas, in a hospital that prized speed over soul, detachment over depth. That night, Jacob sat alone by the fire. The wind moved through the palm trees. He thought of all the patients he had treated back home, all the times he had walked away without really seeing them. For the first time in years, he prayed, not for answers, but for courage, to stay open. And something shifted. The team began taking fewer photos, not because they cared less, but because they no longer felt like visitors. They felt like participants. They learned local words. They stopped calling people patients and started calling them by name. They remembered birthdays, grieved when a dog died, celebrated when the rain came on time. One evening, the whole barangay gathered for a pasalamat, a Thanksgiving celebration. Not for any one reason, just to say, we're still here. There was music, dancing, and food stretched miraculously to feed everyone. And as the songs filled the night, Lauren saw something that undid her completely. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, dancing with an old man in a wheelchair. His legs were stiff, his face lined with struggle, yet there he was, smiling as the child twirled before him. But they danced anyway. He clapped, she twirled, and soon the whole crowd joined in. It wasn't just a party, it was a declaration. We are alive. We still choose joy. Lauren felt her eyes well up, not with sadness, but with something deeper, a reverence she couldn't name. She turned to Jacob. Did you ever think, she whispered, that we'd come all this way just to remember how to feel? Jacob nodded. I think we came here to heal. We just didn't know we were the ones who needed it. Later that week, they held their final clinic in a mountaintop village. People had walked for hours to reach them, some barefoot, carrying small bags of rice or eggs, not as payment, but as gifts of gratitude. One elderly woman took Jacob's hand after her checkup and pressed it to her forehead, a traditional mano, a gesture of respect. She looked him in the eyes and said, "You are one of us now, Doc. Don't forget." Jacob couldn't reply. He knew he never would forget, not the kindness, not the resilience, not the songs at funerals, the laughter in storms, the kind of healing that had nothing to do with medicine. This wasn't a mission anymore. It was a homecoming. Their final morning in the Philippines was quiet. Mist rose over the rice fields. A few neighbors waved from their windows. No fanfare, no speeches, just stillness. Lauren sat on the wooden steps of the Nipa house where they had stayed, sipping coffee brewed over charcoal. The smoky scent wrapped around her like comfort. On her wrist was a woven bracelet, a gift from the children who had followed her everywhere. Just thread, faded and worn, but to her it was worth more than any diploma. Jacob sat beside her, holding a journal, not filled with charts, but with questions, realizations, and fragments of a new self. They didn't speak at first. They didn't need to. Something had ended, and something else had begun. Finally, Jacob broke the silence. You remember what the elder told me? That I'm one of them now? Lauren nodded. Well, he said softly, I think he meant it. They both smiled, gentle, bittersweet. On the Jeep ride back to the city, they passed fields where they had treated children, rivers where they had bathed, chapels where they had knelt with grieving mothers. Every corner held a memory, a lesson, a face. When they reached the airport, everything felt strange. The sterile lights, the loud announcements, the rush of people. It all seemed louder, faster, emptier. They boarded their flight in silence, but something carried them. Not guilt, not pity, a deep, quiet honor. Back in the U.S., the world hadn't changed, but they had. In Seattle, Lauren returned to her hospital and began noticing things she had missed before. The loneliness in patients' eyes, the distance between staff, the way healing was rushed like a checklist. She started slowing down. She began asking questions like, do you have someone to talk to? Or, would you like me to sit with you a moment? Some colleagues raised eyebrows. Others followed. Jacob, on the other hand, didn't go back to his old job. He left it entirely. He began working in rural clinics across the Midwest, bringing not just medical skill, but presence. He taught his interns about Filipino values, community, reverence for elders, healing through connection. He told them stories not from textbooks but from memory, about a woman who diagnosed with her hands, a child who gave away his slippers, a mother who smiled through her tears. And when people asked what changed him, he never gave a technical answer. He simply said, I went to teach medicine, but I learned humanity in the Philippines. Over time, the mission team reconnected through emails, video calls, shared reflections. They weren't just doctors anymore. They were carriers of something rare, a truth no classroom could teach, a truth that smelled like wood smoke and tasted like cassava, a truth born in a land where healing was never about power or prestige, but about humility. In her speeches now, Lauren begins with a question. Do you know where I learned the most important lesson of my career? People expect her to name a famous university or a groundbreaking journal. Instead, she says, in a small village with no roads, from people who had every reason to give up, but never did, because that's the real story. Not that Americans came to heal the Philippines, but that the Philippines, quietly, humbly, without even trying, healed them. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the quiet strength of the Filipino spirit, don't just scroll past. Share this with someone who needs to remember what true healing looks like. And if you're proud of the kindness, the faith, and the deep wisdom found in our barangays, hit that like button and let the world know. Subscribe for more untold stories that honor the soul of the Filipino people. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons don't come from books.